Welcome back to my series of Spider-Man reviews. We've covered the Raimi trilogy, and now we're moving into Marc Webb's trilogy. Oh, actually, it's just 2 movies. Awkward. The Amazing Spider-Man. A lot of people were excited about this movie. It was being marketed as the untold story of the beloved web-slinger, which was a clever ploy to get us to sit in the theater expecting something new, and to give us a reason for this reboot actually existing. Marc Webb directed this movie. He was plucked from indie obscurity after making the very good 500 Days of Summer, and he made a movie with no style of his own, really. In truth, this film comes off as a 2-hour and 16-minute indie rock music video featuring someone who resembles Spider-Man. Hate me yet? Good, because I'm not done. So look, I rewatched this movie yesterday because I haven't really enjoyed this movie since it came out. And a lot of people have told me that they feel that I'm incorrect or I'm being too harsh on the movie. So I rewatched this movie last night and I studied it. I mean, I studied it frame for frame. I took like 10 pages of notes. I am prepared to discuss why I don't personally enjoy The Amazing Spider-Man. It'd be easy for me to sit here and say, oh, I don't like this movie, it sucks, it's dumb, and not really give you any concrete reasons. But that's not what I'm gonna do. Let's get in depth about The Amazing Spider-Man, spoiler-filled of course. Here's the reasons why this movie disappointed me. Let's talk about Peter Parker. Obviously, he's the most well-rounded character in this movie. You learn a little bit about his parents, but really not that much. You care about him kind of, but in the long run, I just didn't like Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Peter Parker. He's kind of a punk. He likes to skateboard in the halls when teachers tell him not to. He humiliates Flash on purpose. He's kind of a creeper as well, taking pictures of Gwen Stacy from a distance. I didn't feel much sympathy for him in this movie, which was a major letdown for me. And Andrew Garfield, as I watched this movie, kind of portrays Peter as if he has a hangover in almost every scene. Let's talk about the good and bad of Spider-Man's character development. The good is that he's a little bit more quippy. For one scene. One of the major complaints with Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy was that Spider-Man wasn't quippy enough, he didn't make enough jokes. So they heard you, and they made one scene for you in which he demolishes this car thief. He sprays webbing all over him, even on the nutsack. He calls him names, he makes fun of the cop even as well. Now that was one scene for the fans. Please look at that from a filmmaking perspective. That really was just one scene. They said, okay, we'll get this scene out of the way where he makes jokes, and then they never have him do it again. It was just a fan service scene for us. At least in the Raimi films, the quips, while minimal, were spread out. Here they just did one quick scene in which the only goal of that scene was to make Spider-Man tell some jokes and move on from there and never have him do it again. I do, however, think Andrew Garfield is far more likable as Spider-Man than he is as Peter Parker. He definitely understands the character, and what I like about his portrayal is that in real life, he really is a humongous fan of Spider-Man, and it was special to him, and you can tell that he's really trying to honor it. I personally don't care if he has organic web shooters or he makes the web shooters himself. Let's get this out of the way. I hate the suit in this movie. It looks like a basketball. And trust me, I've heard every single defense for that. Well, he's just a poor high schooler. How can he afford to make a really awesome suit like some Hollywood costume designer? Well, if he's so poor, how can he afford to make web shooters with tensile string that can balance a human being between skyscrapers or attach multiple cars to a bridge? If he can create that tech, he should be able to make a suit that looks better than a basketball. Let's talk about the character development of Gwen Stacy. There is none. I like Emma Stone quite a bit. She's a very likable actress, and she gets a lot of laughs in this movie because she is funny as a person, and you can feel that seeping through her. There's good chemistry there between Peter and Gwen. These actors were dating in real life, so that probably helped. But rewatching this movie, I found no attempt to develop her character, even in the slightest. Here are her 2 character traits. She has a crush on Peter Parker, and she can make an antidote for lizard serum in like 5 minutes. The most impactful thing that happens to her character happens at the end of the movie when her father dies, and that's the end of the movie. How about Aunt May and Uncle Ben? Well, Aunt May's role in this movie is to worry. Peter comes home, Aunt May's worried. Peter comes home, Aunt May's worried. That happens about 5 times. She doesn't really do much in the film except worry over and over again. Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben does a fairly good job. He's good in this movie. It's just that the film has such a hard time balancing the brilliant performance that Cliff Robertson gave in the first one, the with great power comes great responsibility line, and trying not to copy too much off Raimi's films, and so they throw in this.
If you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
It's like they were afraid to just say it again for some reason, and they had to figure out a different way to write the exact same phrase. And it just comes off so tired. Here's the big one for me. In regards to character development, Dr. Connors / the Lizard is without a doubt the worst developed, worst fleshed out of any of the Spider-Man villains in the 4 films we had received at that time. What's the motivation for his character? Well, he's trying to work on cross-species genetics. He's trying to regrow his arm, and he has a deadline because Norman Osborn, the head of Oscorp, is dying. We never see this man. We never meet Norman Osborn. But we're supposed to somehow care about this character we've never seen. The urgency of Dr. Connor's situation is entirely because Irrfan Khan comes in every once in a while and says, hey, Norman Osborn is dying. You need to create this, and you need to do it fast. And for some reason, we're supposed to care about his situation. The real motivation, though, is regrowing his arm. So he eventually injects himself and becomes the first human trial. The problem is, the entire development of his character rests around him wanting to regrow his arm, which leads into him transforming into a monster. All development given to his character is so that he can become this lizard creature. Once that happens, the script has no idea what to do with this man, and he just becomes insane and starts getting voices in his head, like Norman Osborn in the first Spider-Man film, and for some reason concocts the most idiotic plan a villain could ever have: turn all of New York into lizard creatures. Where did this come from? It's the worst writing for a Spider-Man villain in any of the films thus far. There was an overabundance of villains in Spider-Man 3, but at least their motivation was clear. I understood why Harry hated Peter. I understood why Eddie hated Peter. I understood why Sandman wanted to provide for his daughter. In this film, the motivation for the Lizard's insanely idiotic plan is so unclear. There were, however, a lot of deleted scenes where Dr. Connors had a son, and there was something wrong there, and it was like, hey, there's something. Oh, they removed it from the movie. Now there's nothing! Now that I've talked about the poor character development, let's talk about the filmmaking, the directing, the storytelling. This is a dull, drab-looking movie with an emphasis on dark, gray colors, which is such an odd choice for a character as colorful as Spider-Man. The action sequences are largely flat and sometimes rapidly edited, like the subway sequence where Peter first discovers his powers. It takes 94 minutes to get to the first real confrontation between the Lizard and Spider-Man, and I'm talking about a sequence. What's a sequence? Well, that would be like the Times Square scene in the first Spider-Man, or the train scene in Spider-Man 2. Those are sequences. Spidey and the Lizard in a sewer where the Lizard scratches him on the chest and then Spider-Man falls into a pipe, that's not a sequence. That's like a little moment. The school confrontation is 94 minutes into this movie where we finally get something of meat between these two characters. Before that, the film is bogged down by heavy montage sequences, including 3 Bing search results scenes. 3. Let's talk about exposition. This film is riddled with it. There are so many scenes where characters need to be progressed from point A to point B, and the writers have no idea how to do this except, let's have Peter go to Kurt Connor's house and Kurt will tell him a whole bunch of stuff about his parents, I guess. The worst offense of this by far is when Peter finds the Lizard's lair in the sewer, and there is literally a gigantic pile of exposition just waiting for him, including videos that he can press play on and hear the Lizard's entire plan spoken to him. It's very offensive to me that this is how the screenwriters chose to tell this story. Just have Peter stumble across information throughout the entire film. Let's talk about disappearing characters and or subplots. Peter completely abandons the search for his uncle's killer after like a 10-minute montage sequence, and it's never brought up again ever. He looks everywhere for this guy. He beats up all these thugs and nothing comes of it. It's like the writers were just looking for little subplots to fill up the script, and when they got bored of one of them, they just abandoned it and moved on to something else. That's how this film feels. Let's talk about Irrfan Khan. This is a terrific actor, very famous in India, and if you go and read the IMDb user reviews for when this movie first came out and specifically look for usernames that look as if they're an Indian name, most of these reviews are like, where did Irrfan Khan go? Where'd this guy... He's like the Tom Cruise of India. This guy is very famous, and he's an excellent actor. It's disgraceful in so many ways that his character vanishes from this movie. There was a deleted scene where his character appeared at the bottom of the sewer and gave some finality and closure to his character, but it was deleted. It's not in the movie, so I can't act like it was. He's on the bridge, and then they never talk about him again. He just vanishes into thin air. Let's talk about some of the stylistic choices. There really aren't much. Mostly this film comes off, as I said, like an indie rock music video. There are so many sequences that are just montages filled with songs that can fill up the soundtrack. There really isn't that much style to this movie. You can't really differentiate this film as any one director. With Sam Raimi's trilogy, those felt like Sam Raimi movies, like the hospital scene in Spider-Man 2. Nothing about Marc Webb's film feels like a Marc Webb film. It all feels very workmanlike. Let's talk about the ending. The crane swinging sequence is cool because Spider-Man looks awesome swinging around, and we all love to see Spider-Man swinging around on buildings. But what's really happening there? Nothing of impact is happening here. There is one construction worker that starts this in motion who Spider-Man helped earlier by saving his son on that bridge. But besides that, the reason this sequence has no impact to me is because you're finally seeing the city support Spider-Man, and it's supposed to be like, oh my gosh, they're supporting him, yes. But there's never a scene in this movie where the city doesn't support Spider-Man. There's never a sequence where the city is depicted as hating Spider-Man. In fact, the only character that is depicted as not supporting Spider-Man is Captain Stacy, played by Denis Leary, which is why when Captain Stacy and Spider-Man team up to defeat the Lizard at the end, that felt like it had some emotional weight because there was an arc there. I don't care about the city helping Spider-Man with cranes because the city has never been a character of itself that hated or disliked Spider-Man. Everyone was always in support of him. To be honest, throughout this entire sequence, I was more curious what was happening to those cops that the Lizard sprayed with the gas that were turning into lizard cops for like 15 minutes. I want to know what happened during those 15 minutes. I want to see a spin-off short film called Lizard Cops about the 15 minutes where the lizard cops were lizard creatures. What was happening on the ground? This film is a mess. I'm sorry, this film's a mess. While Spider-Man's fighting the Lizard, there are lizard cops running around in New York, I guess, and it never goes back to that. It's just... So Gwen, within like 8 minutes, creates an antidote for this thing, and it really is like they had no idea how to end this movie. It's honestly like the writers were sitting there and just, they were like, we don't know what to do. Just make the Lizard shoot gas everywhere, turns everyone into creatures. Who cares why he wants to do it? Have Gwen make an antidote. Who cares how she knows how to make this antidote? Just who freaking cares? It's Spider-Man. We're Sony, okay? They'll go and pay to see it, all right? Just write whatever. So Captain Stacy's dying wish is that Peter stay away from Gwen. In the comics, Captain Stacy actually wanted Peter to protect Gwen. Captain Stacy was on the side of Peter in the comics. They switched that around for this movie. Parker promises this, and then like 5 minutes later changes his mind. The end. Guys, I would honestly rather watch Spider-Man 3 over this movie any day. Do you want to know why? That movie's a mess. I don't like that movie, but at least its characters' motivations are clear, and most of the characters do have development that are given to them, even though there's an overabundance of stories and it's very messy. At least all of the characters do feel like characters. This film feels heavily like a product to me. They tried to reboot Spider-Man by catering to fans who didn't like Sam Raimi's films by saying this was going to be an untold story with things like web shooters and quips, and made it seem like it was going to be this very special film, and to me, it's a gigantic mess. I'm gonna give The Amazing Spider-Man a C-. Guys, those are my thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man. I'm going to have my review of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 very soon for you guys. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.